members of the South African National Defence Force who were assaulted by Deputy President Paul Mashadile's VIP security team have opened cases. Workers affiliated to Labour Federation Cosatu painted parts of the country red, voicing their dissatisfaction on various economic issues impacting their lives. And the tax season has officially opened. A very good afternoon. If you've just joined us, we're coming to you live from our studios in Johannesburg. Welcome to the Week in Review, the program where we review some of the biggest stories to come out of the week. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalane. Now, workers affiliated to Labour Federation Cosatu painted parts of the country red, voicing their dissatisfaction on various economic issues impacting their lives. Their demands included increasing the national social grant, salary payments in certain municipalities, allowing municipal workers to hold political office and saving the failing state-run post office. Now, although the turnout was poor, some businesses still opted to close shop for the day, anticipating possible violence that often accompanies marches.
The working class has borne the brunt of the harsh economic conditions. This has caused many to live from hand to mouth and drowning in debt. But the well-being of workers was not the only reason why Cosatu and its affiliated unions took to the streets across the country. Among their other demands was an increase of the SRD grant, the implementation of the two-pot pensions reform, and urgent interventions to prevent the collapse and liquidation of the post office. Cosatu President Zingiswa Losi, who led the march in Gqeberha, says although there was a low turnout, the Federation is not discouraged from getting its message across.
It is winter, workers are demoralized because of the issues, but workers came out. We are happy that we managed to come here, but we have also been very clear to the leadership of this metro that workers cannot tolerate political instability. Workers cannot tolerate the non-service delivery.
In Kimberley, in the Northern Cape, workers demanded the end of corruption, unemployment and improvement in the living standards of workers, also curbing job losses, putting the post office in the spotlight where employees are facing possible unemployment.
We have also raised issues around corruption. We know that when you steal from the public purse, in fact, you are stealing our jobs. Many workers have lost their jobs because of corruption. We once had the statistics that says that for every 26 billion rand that gets stolen in the public service, almost 72,000 people are losing their jobs. So families are then suffering because of that.
Cosatu in the Western Cape has called on the provincial government to do more to address crime in poor areas, and it also wants urgency from national government in arresting high levels of unemployment, corruption and the erosion of workers' rights. Workers demand the speedy prosecution of corruption cases and improved implementation of the national GBV plan. Those who joined the picket lines say the rising cost of living, high unemployment and job losses are contributing to the breakdown of society.
On a day-to-day basis, people is losing their jobs, contracts is ending, retrenchments, factories is closing down, and there's a very big impact because there is 10 people in a household, for example, and then 8 of them is at home. They don't have a work, and then 2 is working. So when that 2 people also lose their job, then who's going to be the breadwinner?
In Mpumalanga, the march was in solidarity with farm workers. Cosatu members marched to the AP Force and Science farm to hand over a memorandum of grievances. The union used the march to call for decisive leadership that will attend to the workers' challenges timelessly.
What we require as good progress is that we need good leadership and very decisive leadership in the country. We want a leadership that understands the plight of our people, the pains, a leadership that will act if things are not happening.
In the province of Limpopo, workers say there's been a lack of urgency concerning the implementation of the Special Investigating Unit report on alleged corruption at the Provincial Department of Health. Workers from different Cosatu affiliated labor unions believe the lack of accountability and impunity enjoyed by those implicated in corruption are major contributors to what they call a decline in ethical governance.
We have an SIU report that concerns this department where we are marching now, where we have stopped now. We also have the forensic report related to the VBS. Those reports have not been implemented. We haven't seen people going to courts and to be prosecuted in the courts, so that courts may take appropriate decisions in terms of the guilt or not of the accused.
In Durban, unions affiliated to Cosatu say there are many issues affecting workers in KwaZulu-Natal, including labor brokers and rising unemployment. They've called on government to stop undermining collective bargaining when negotiating for workers' wages. The Union Federation further called on the eThekwini municipality to revise its billing system.
We have demanded to the African National Congress and its government that they must remove and review the macroeconomic policy in our country. We need an economic policy that is alive to the fact that what we are faced here is not just any kind of an economy.
Free State, a handful of marchers also took to the streets. Workers in various municipalities in the province have gone unpaid for months. The union has called on the Harmony Target Mine to reinstate shop stewards who have allegedly been fired due to their affiliations.
There's issues about corruption, there's issues about non-implementation of the resolutions, the issues around poor service delivery to the municipalities. You know that about 2 out of 258 municipalities have collapsed, and these municipalities, workers in this province, you've got almost about 8 or 9 municipalities that are not able to pay workers.
In Gauteng, the march concluded at the office of the Premier, Banyaza Lesufi. Cosatu's second deputy president, Lufuno Duncan, was disappointed that the Premier could not accept the memorandum himself.
Comrades, it cannot be as a working class when we are warning our government. We want our government with the issue of what you call tolls. They didn't listen. But this is Banyaza. Not for only that, wanted to thank him as well for trying and create jobs, comrade. Though it is just a dent, as the chair said. However, he's doing something comrade compared to all these other provinces. It's unfortunate that he decided to say, relegate us and say, no, you'll go to other things and not come here. Disrespect Motha. Maybe, comrade, let's also remind ourselves, commend yourselves, comrade, for what you did.
Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation David Mahlobo received the memorandum and commended the workers for exercising their rights. At the same time, the poor turnout is said to be attributable to organizational weaknesses in the Federation.
The Federation is experiencing some organizational weaknesses. The muscle to pull a huge protest program is no longer as it used to be.
Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, now to talk to us a bit more on this is Labour lawyer Patrick Deal. Mr. Deal, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. Now, a number of commentators have said the National Day of Action was underwhelming. The EFF actually went as far as saying it was a dismal failure. Where do you stand on this?
Well, good afternoon, and good afternoon to our viewers as well. Look, I think you can measure it in a couple of ways. The first way is to measure it against the publicity that the strike has drawn to the general public, to the government, and everyone in the country. And by that measure, I think it has some degree of success. The fact that we're talking now about it and that there's been lots of coverage of the last couple of days is testament to the fact that there's been a lot of publicity, and that's what the purpose, as I understand it, of the march itself or the strike itself was to draw attention to the government of all of the failings in the country, the multiple issues that they have raised. So if you're going to measure that as a benchmark, to some degree it was successful. If you're only judging it by the numbers of people who turned up, which were low, you can only say that it was very mediocre, in a generous way, but it wasn't very impressive from a turnout point of view. And that could be attributed to a range of reasons. So overall, if their intention was to draw attention to the government and society at large, that there's a lot of unhappiness, there's a lot of discontent, it had some purpose, it served its purpose in some degree in relation to that.
But some others have argued that many didn't necessarily focus on the issues that took them to the streets, but rather on the poor showing that here many are now talking of perhaps the voice and power of organized labor now starting to diminish as was predicted.
That's right. Just on the first thing, on the general showing, just come back slightly to it. I think that what Cosatu has done is to position itself as a litmus test, a barometer of the general discontentment in society, as their constituency, that which they would term the broader working class. The working class, not only the union who are working, but the others, the 8 million or so who don't have jobs, would like to work. So their positioning in relation to that is that is their kind of mandate, if you like, is to draw attention to that, as we've just said. But insofar as that's from top down, from bottom up, as a previous speaker just mentioned, he's absolutely right that there is organizational weakness, which extends down to industry level, particularly in plants and factories and retail stores and so on, where the ability of Cosatu unions and other unions to render the kind of services that workers require, day-to-day grievances, disciplinary inquiries, discrimination, victimization, all of those things, is weak. And if it's weak at the bottom, the faith that people in everyday working class have in Cosatu's ability to make a change from the top that is somehow going to affect their daily lives, I think is limited. And that's why I think we have a muted response to these things. And at the same time, they don't want to risk losing a day's pay. Yes, they won't lose their jobs. But why lose a day's pay when you don't have a lot of faith in the, in the impact that a top-down strike from Cosatu's level will have in society? And can I also say that a lot of these issues we all share, we all feel the same degree of unhappiness with most of the issues that Cosatu has raised, generally in society. And they have a tough job in trying to rally support from a literal attendance point of view. They are talking, as they have to talk at NEDLAC level, which is the highest level of engagement between government, labour and capital or employers, before they came on the strike. So they have tried to make a difference in that institution, which is laudable. And what you have to give Cosatu considerable credit for, I think, in the manner in which the strike has unfolded, let alone the numbers, is the orderly manner in which it's been done, and peaceful and not interrupting, massive traffic jams and that kind of stuff. And I think Cosatu deserves considerable credit for the manner in which it has been conducted in the orderly manner. The alternative is to voice discontent by, a whole bunch of people without representation, without due process, legal processes in this case, which were complied with. And then that is dangerous, as we've seen in rioting, which is really, in a lot of ways, a kind of a response to general discontent. So the orderly manner and the management of the strike itself, which is a major undertaking, by the way, has been done very, very well and very, very peacefully. So I think they deserve kudos and credit for that component of it. The impact we will see in time to come, to what effect it actually delivers results that change the everyday lives of their members at the shop floor.
No, most certainly the peaceful protest is commendable, because we do live in an era where now they're really gauging the success of your protest by whether you were able to destabilize business and shut the country down or the economy down. So I suppose it is commendable that we're going back to that. But if we had to look at the issues that took them to the streets, your load shedding, your crime, the issues that you say are not just theirs but ours too, many believe the issues are legitimate, but they're not necessarily convinced protest remains the appropriate tool or instrument to bring about change in this country. Is this honestly the case?
I think so, especially when it's, got to do with such a wide range of issues, from load shedding to unemployment and so on, that I think that there may be alternatives to taking to the street and workers risking a day's work and so on to do that. And there are multiple communication channels out there which can be used, and of course Cosatu does use those, but then maybe they could be used better. Maybe they could there could be more communication, not only from them, but from the engagements that they have with the government about the issues on the agendas that they are talking to them about, any progress that has been happening, any ideas to try and improve, whatever the issues are. Their main aim is to change the macroeconomic order of South Africa into something more kind of worker-friendly as opposed to what they conceive to be capital-friendly. Mm-hmm. So communication and more engagement and information sharing on a day-to-day business, that things are happening. We don't see things happen, while the pressure builds up and builds up and builds up and discontent. It suddenly comes in a big strike like this, and we think, wow, nothing's been done. And this is a way to relieve the pressure, let off the steam, as it were.
Patrick, now just before, apologies for interjecting there. Apologies, you seem to be a bit pressed for time. But just in closing, I just wanted to gauge your sense on the whole issue around the call for an increase in salaries. We've always understood that trade union strength is in its membership. High unemployment weakens trade unions. So where do you stand on just the argument that calling for higher wages now would further weaken unions because employees would simply just lay off some workers to meet the demand of the few?
I think it's a valid point, and I think unions, would serve themselves well with their credibility of not only, their members to kind of preserve their jobs and so on, if certain industries and businesses are threatened, but to moderate wage demands, and also to in a way protect industries and to not create a situation where employers become unviable or businesses become unviable. And so that kind of restraint could, in a way, protect the goose that lays the golden egg. Obviously asking for higher wages and more pay when, the businesses can't afford it, to sustain themselves is certainly a way that they could get recognition for their restraint and engage more directly with employers at plant level and at industry level about how Cosatu could contribute to growing the economic cake and expanding the pie rather than concentrating on power and efforts to distribute the cake more and more. In other words, with high wages and so on. Grow the cake first, then let's look a way of sharing what the expanded cake is after we have done that. I think that's where the attention could be, in preference to demanding high wages only. Demand a place at the table for creating new ways of production, new ways of expanding businesses, expanding markets, commercial-orientated issues, not just a demand and defend kind of attitude. I think the psychology, if it changed for the better, from a more of a partnership kind of attitude with employers, rather than a kind of combat zone and in seeing the employers as enemies, I think that would make a substantial difference to the quality of engagement and the quality of results.
Patrick, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was Labour lawyer Patrick Deal. Now, still to come on the Weekend Review, Busio Mkhwebane has missed her deadline to answer questions by the Section 194 inquiry. That story and more in just a bit. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the Electricity Minister, that's Dr. Ramokgopa, has expressed optimism over a possible end to rolling blackouts in future. His optimism comes as Eskom implements lower stages of power cuts during the winter season. Ramokgopa was speaking during the ANC National Executive Committee Economic Transformation Subcommittee's media briefing at the Birchwood Hotel in Ekurhuleni a bit earlier.
We have lifted the energy availability factor by 12 percentage points. Just to put that into context, 1 percentage point really amounts to about 477 megawatts of additional generating capacity. And that's why now we are attaining the average levels that are just below, shy of 30,000 megawatts, the availability factor. And we've been able to maintain that over a period of time, and that's why the country has been observing a situation where about 2/3 of the day we are not experiencing load shedding, or in instances where we do, we're able to keep that to stage 1 load shedding, and then we go to stage 3. So that has been the permutation that we've been keeping for the past 3 weeks or so. That communicates one big message, is that we are succeeding in maintaining those levels of efficiency, which is something that has been failing us. And then the second part was also on how we burn the diesel, the open cycle gas turbines. Although we've been in the midst and the throes of winter, we have not been burning it at the rate that we thought we'll be burning it. So we've been able to save, if you like, the Eskom fiscal some money, and then we'll engage them as and when they are required. We know in the next 2 weeks we'll be entering one of the coldest periods during the winter, and in fact the projections are that Monday is going to be the coldest day recorded so far in this winter period. So we'll see how we perform. And I was making the point at the NEC that the best measure is not where we are in relation to the stages of load shedding. The best measure is on the performance of those units. As long as we are able to maintain them at 60% and 60 plus, we'll be able to provide relief.
All right, still on politics, but to the Democratic Alliance now, which believes next month's national convention could provide a possible springboard to victory at next year's elections and seating the ANC government. The DA, IFP, Freedom Front Plus, Action SA and other like-minded parties will meet to discuss a program of action and negotiate a post-2024 government. Action SA will be seeking public opinion on the matter, but the National Freedom Party has distanced itself from the proposed Moonshot Pact, calling it selfish.
6 opposition parties with the common vision of booting out the governing party. They will converge next month for this purpose. The 2-day convention will be held at the same venue where the historic CODESA negotiations took place. The DA leader says a successful convention will also provide certainty and the stability that will be crucial for the forming of a coalition government in 2024, should no party reach 50%.
We believe that the outcome could provide opposition voters with something that they've never had before, and that is a credible prospect of victory. By working together, the pact can be greater than the sum of our collective parts. By showing that South Africa can be rescued if we only have the courage to stand together, I believe that the pact can energize the 13 million voters who are not registered to do so, and give the 14 million people who are registered but failed to vote in 2021 a new reason to vote.
However, the NFP says it will not take part in the convention.
By responding to their invitations was merely honoring the invitation. It has got nothing to do with us agreeing to work with them, because we've got nothing in common. The DA has got a particular interest, whereas the NFP represent the poorest amongst our society.
Suspended Public Protector Advocate Busi Mkhwebane has missed the deadline to answer written questions to her by the Section 194 inquiry members and evidence leaders. Now, that's according to the inquiry's chairperson, Kubudile Janchi, who says her conduct is of grave concern. Mkhwebane was expected to respond to the written questions by Wednesday.
Mkhwebane is disrespectful and her conduct is of grave concern. That's the sentiment of the inquiry chairperson. Ubutile Jantshi says it's not the first time that Mkhwebane snubbed the committee.
I can confirm that by the due date of the 6th of July, she failed to submit any responses. She has therefore effectively elected not to honor the directive of the committee and that of the National Assembly, an institution that all heads of Chapter 9 institutions account to. B, she chose not to add anything further on the evidence that the committee already has.
Mkhwebane has been given another deadline to the end of Friday, this time around, to indicate how she would conduct her closing arguments in the next 2 weeks.
On the 28th of July, the Section 194 Committee will convene to consider and deliberate on the draft report. And thereafter, we will share such a draft report to the suspended public protector for a final comment and a final audi as we proceed to table the report to the National Assembly.
Jantshi claims that Mkhwebane insists she will not respond to the illegal deadlines. This as Mkhwebane seeks an additional month to brief council. But the committee is not budging, saying it will complete its draft report by the end of the month. Meanwhile, the ATM has written to the Judicial Service Commission expressing its displeasure at what it says is the Constitutional Court's delay in delivering judgment in the suspended public protector, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's suspension case.
On the 24th of November 2022, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's suspension matter was heard by the Constitutional Court on an urgent basis, yet astonishingly, 8 months later, we still do not have a judgment by the Constitutional Court, despite the Superior Court's Act confirming that every effort should be made by judges to hand down judgments within 3 months.
The ATM wants the JSC to intervene in the alleged Concord delay. Ulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
Now, 7 parties are set to participate in a national convention on the DA-led Moonshot Pact in August. Opposition parties due to take part in a national convention, the DA's Moonshot Pact in August, are preparing their positions to work together to block an ANC-EFF coalition after the 2024 general elections. While formal talks are planned for August, the parties have begun internal consultations to consolidate their views on the matter. In the lead up to the convention, Action SA says it will embark on a nationwide campaign to gauge public opinion. The FF Plus adds it will not join a coalition before the 2024 election if there is no declaration stating parties will not form an alliance with the ANC. We're joined by political analyst Tato Wamahohodi, who's MD of Khodiso Sichaba Foundation, for analysis on this. Tato, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. So on the face of it, some say the Moonshot Convention is a great idea, given the instability we've been subjected to at local government level with these current coalitions. But others argue the parties risk having their identities or policy positions being lost in all this collaborative talk, even before the election's outcome. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I think let me start by greeting the viewers at home. And on the question of the Moon Pact, the Moonshot Pact, I think you are correct to suggest that it will weaken the brand of different political parties that may want to stand with the DA and dilute them into a DA-lucky type of image. I think that is the major worry, that is an Achilles heel for the possibility of the Moonshot Pact to really sprint off. But the other weakness that I think engulfs the Moonshot Pact is the fact that these other political parties also have at the back of their mind a battle for kingmaker status. If the ANC drops below 40%, they may want to be the ones coming forward to the ANC and saying, we can form government with you with response strategies. And this Moonshot Pact will get it in their way. So they are likely to be the Moonshot Pact in order to go to the ANC and say, we can form government with you. Get a seat or two selfishly for themselves.
Now, you mentioned two weaknesses there, significant ones at that. If we start with just perhaps their messaging or identity being lost in this whole thing, if we look at the Freedom Front Plus and Action SA, they've essentially been eating into the DA's support. So would it honestly be beneficial for them as smaller parties to enter into some sort of a partnership that would somewhat be headed by the DA, when one would think they would desperately want their messaging to be distinguishable from that of the Democratic Alliance?
Well, in modern South African politics, the politics of agenda are sometimes diluted by the personal interest of leaders. So they're likely to converge with the DA on that basis. But there's another argument which the ruling party, as the ANC, has begun making against the Pact. It says that these parties are converging on the basis of an agenda to block fundamental transformation in South Africa. If you look at all of them, I think I agree with David Makura, who says that. For instance, if you look at the Freedom Front, they, for instance, do not agree with the policy of affirmative action, which is an anti-transformation stance. If you look at the United Independent Movement, which claims to be moderate middle, you will be able to drill down their real views if you listen to their leaders. The leader of the UIM has said, for instance, that one of the reasons he left the ANC, because he's a former member of the ANC, is because he does not agree with the ANC on plans of flirting with the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, and possibly the issue of the nationalization of, or rather the land question, where the ANC is flirting with the notion of the expropriation of land without compensation. So Mukura is correct to suggest that these are parties that have come together to block the transformation agenda towards a left posture in South Africa. And therefore, I think for me, it's the basis of their conventions. But what is important to note is that South Africans will not take kind to such a collective posture, because the majority of South Africans who are black in general and African working class in particular want to see transformation. The question that can be posed is whether the ANC is the right vehicle to execute that. But definitely what will be clear in the minds of South Africans is that this is not a pact to pursue a transformation agenda that will change their lives for the better.
Let's zoom into the ANC-EFF dynamic now. They're working together in local government, but if we are to look at just Ekurhuleni right now, Zuma Hlabathi's tone, for me, is somewhat similar to that of Mzwandile Masine, which got him into a lot of trouble with the PEC. Zuma seems to feel that a relationship with the EFF is more harmful than beneficial for the ANC. And we seem to be seeing it unraveling right now before our very eyes. So are you convinced that they could possibly work together post the general elections?
They don't have to have. They don't seem to have much of a choice for a plethora of reasons. One of them is the fact that ideologically, if from a statistician point of view, they are looking on the other side of the political spectrum, and they are seeing right-wing, center-right parties coming together. They will likely want to accord a counter thesis to that and come together on the basis that they are at least both left-wing. For instance, the EFF claims to be a disciplined force of the left. The ANC claims to be a disciplined force of the left, and the EFF also claims to be a leftist party that is driven by Marxist-Leninist policies. And for me, I think that is the glue that will bring them together. And you can see that translating to real policy. For instance, they will be able to agree on the land question, which the other side of the spectrum does not agree with, and they will be able to achieve a lot working together in that regard. So they are glued together.
But the EFF would differ fundamentally. I think the EFF would differ or argue vehemently that the ANC is not necessarily left at this point. Perhaps they are centrist or just a nationalist party at this point. So you believe that they still occupy that left space along with the EFF and perhaps your SACPs in just policy?
Yeah, but the different variants of the left in South Africa. The ANC is certainly one of those which is obviously drawn towards the center, but on the left. The EFF is towards the other side, but definitely, if you take the fence, they will definitely fall on the left, because if you look at the fundamentals of the ANC policy, whether it is foreign policy, whether it is national policy, if you look at the ANC's foreign policy, for instance, they are converging. For instance, on the issue of how to look at the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which is fought on the backdrop of a bigger agenda, which is creating a multipolar world. Both of them agree that the world needs to move towards multipolarity. That is a fundamental policy convergence. They agree on the land, the fundamentals of the land question. They may disagree with maybe small tactics around it, but I think the essence of policy output from both parties can come together if you look at fundamentals of the political spectrum in South Africa.
All right. And then just in closing, much has been made of the convention itself and where it's going to take place. It's going to be hosted at the venue where the CODESA negotiations took place. Your thoughts on just the choice of the venue and what it perhaps symbolizes for a democratic architecture going forward?
Well, I think there's a deliberate choice around the Kempton Park venue because, symbolism goes a long way in politics. What associated with something is likely to give an impression that it is that which you are associating it with. So they've deliberately associated themselves with Kempton Park because it represents a landslide victory of a new dispensation, transition from one government that people of South Africa did not like to something else. So they want to claim to be occupying that space of transition from a government that is led by the ANC today that they believe South Africans may not like they used to in the past, which symbolizes a change path which they want to represent. So for me, I think it's that kind of symbolism that they want to employ because it will bring that sense of nostalgia which takes South Africans to vote for them.
All right. Tato, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was political analyst Tato Wamahohodi. He's MD of Khodiso Sichaba Foundation. To this story now, former President Jacob Zuma's lawyers are studying the South Gauteng High Court judgment interdicting him from pursuing a private prosecution against President Cyril Ramaphosa. In a brief statement, the JGZ Foundation says it will take instruction on the way forward, which will be announced in due course. Now, the foundation notes that on the 28th of June, Zuma, in his capacity as private prosecutor, filed his notice of application for leave to appeal against a similar decision by the KwaZulu-Natal High Court in the related prosecution of advocate Billy Downer and journalist Karen Morn. The foundation says it's likely that the South Gauteng High Court judgment will be appealed. Now, delivering the eulogy at Pahad's funeral, Mashatile said South Africans have lost a true leader. The 84-year-old passed away at his home in Johannesburg, surrounded by family and loved ones. His funeral took place on the same day in accordance with Muslim rites. Pahad was afforded a special official funeral.
I had the opportunity to visit Comrade Esop and his family. It was impossible and most painful to reconcile his frail state with the energetic, assertive and forthright Comrade Esop that I have come to know for many decades.
Another veteran of the liberation struggle has passed. Dr. Esop Pahad was born in Swaziland in the Northwest Province in 1939. Family, friends and former colleagues gathered to pay their final respects.
I knew Comrade Esop was ill, but I thought there'd be a few more days or even weeks, So for us, it's a huge, huge loss, this one.
It's quite a sad day. It is tragic. He gave his life to the struggle to emancipate our people.
Just like others of his time, Pahad was respected for standing up against the apartheid regime. Delivering the eulogy, the deputy president described Pahad as a tried and tested leader.
Our generation accepted him as our leader because we knew that he grew up at the collective knee of the generation of Oliver Tambo, Yusuf Dadoo, N.T. Naika, Regis September, Joe Slovo, Helen Joseph, and many others of our outstanding liberators.
In 1964, Pahad was forced into exile after he was banned for 5 years. During his time in exile, he served on leadership structures of the ANC and the SACP. Around this period, he also graduated from the Institute of Social Sciences in Moscow and completed military training in Angola.
But I personally first encountered Comrade Esop through the archives of the liberation movement. He and his contemporaries featured in photographs. It was on the margins of the 1956 treason trial, where they had these placards and posters on outside the court with the words there, "Hands off our leaders."
Following the dawn of democracy, Pahad was appointed to the position of parliamentary councillor to the then Deputy President Thabo Mbeki. 2 years later, he became the Deputy Minister in the Presidency, a position he held until June 1999, after which he became a Minister in the Presidency until 2008. He also served as a member of the National Executive Committee of the South African Communist Party and the African National Congress from 1994 to 2007. After leaving government in 2008, he started a quarterly magazine called The Thinker.
In 1994, he became one of the cadres the ANC deployed into the first democratic parliament, which gave us hope about the future of the democratic South Africa.
Pahad was laid to rest at the West Park Cemetery in Johannesburg. He is survived by his wife Meg, brothers Aziz and Nazim, 2 children and 5 grandchildren. Nhlanhla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, 3 members of the South African National Defence Force who were assaulted by Deputy President Paul Mashatile's VIP security team have opened cases. Officers were filmed assaulting a motorist and 2 passengers near the N1, that's near Stanton, Johannesburg, on Monday. Civil society organizations, Action Society, is representing one of the victims, Lavon Fisher. It says it has written to IPID demanding the assault charges to be escalated to assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm, attempted murder, as well as intimidation and pointing of a firearm.
According to Action Society, Fisher thought they were being hijacked. It's alleged an SUV in front of them and another on the right tried to push them to the side of the road. Action Society's Ian Cameron says police allegedly pointed an assault rifle at Fisher before proceeding to smash the back window of the vehicle they were traveling in.
The complaints or the charges laid against the involved cops should include assault GBH, should include intimidation and also pointing of a firearm. In my opinion, we should even add the charge of attempted murder. This is not a common assault matter. I'm concerned about the way that actually both IPID and the police have responded.
According to Cameron, police proceeded to hit the victim with the back of the rifle on his right jaw and ear. Fisher subsequently lost consciousness and was dragged across the road and further assaulted.
Well, many members of this unit believe they're a law unto themselves because of the unfortunate politicization of the South African police service amongst its upper ranks. So that belief that you can get to the top of this organization not because of how hard you work as a police officer, it's because of who you know. And so when that unit in particular are protecting powerful governing party politicians, believe that they will be protected from any kind of bad behavior.
4 of the police officers seen in the video have been served with notices of intention to suspend letters.
In terms of the SAPS's disciplinary regulations,
4 members have been served with notices of the employer's intention to suspend. They must provide representations why they should not be suspended under the circumstances. Their representation will be considered and the outcome will be communicated to them.
The Deputy President Paul Mashatile and other political parties have since condemned the incident. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, let's take it to this story now. South African amputee dancer Musa Motha wowed Britain's Got Talent judges with a powerful performance. The dancer lost his left leg due to cancer at the young age, but that has not deterred him. He received a special golden buzzer on the show, leaving many teary-eyed. He has arrived back in the country and is now at home in Zone 16 in Sebokeng in the VAR, where the community and the family are welcoming him. Those are in fact live visuals that you're seeing there. And as many have stated that he may not have won Britain's Got Talent, but he most certainly won Mzansi's heart as he left many of us emotional. I actually remember seeing that particular clip on social media. Goodness, I couldn't stop myself from crying. So what a champion he is, and most certainly has represented us well. We'll take you through those live visuals now just to get natural sound, but most certainly I'm sure the community and his family are proud of him. Let's listen in.
Ba emeng ka maoto ha holo ka pele ka mo le re kopa fela ha le ka ya fela morao ka mithara fela hanyane fela morao hore ditulo di kgone ho bonahala ba sa kgone ho dula ba kgone ho dula nna ke tlo kopa a kgethuweng ho lelapa a tle ka mo pele a tlo re amohela hero ya rona ka hare ho zone 16 ka hare ho Sebokeng, ka hare ho Val, ka hare ho Sedibeng. Ne kopa wa lelapa a kgethuweng a tle ka pele a tlo kgona ho amohela moeti wa rona e leng ngwana bo rona ka hare ho Enfuleni.
Ke le dumedisa kaofela setjhaba sa zone 16 ke zone 14 kaofela Vale kaofela le Sedibeng kaofela ke le dumedisa ke le nkgono wa Musa moshimane wa ka ke mo ratang haholo e ke mo hodisitseng ka hare ho lapalane ke sa kgolo hore modimo o tla kwala lemati le leng hantle o tla bula le leng lemati le letle batswadi ba ka se ke la kgathala ke kopa hore batjha ba iponela ke batjha ba se ke ba kgathala ba re ka o bane ka nnete ntse re mesebetsi ha iyo eng ha iyo le ya bona hero ya lona ke yena ya hle ke setloholo saka mme wa hae ke Ntokozo Musa ke nkgono wa hae Musa ke mme wa hae so ke ema tjenana ke leboa media ka ofela e teng ka haro setjhaba senana e kgoneng ho amohela ngwanaka ka moya wa modimo ska ha re qadile ka thapelo bana besong ke kopa le lokolle bana ba lona motho mmona go ona le potential ya ntho e itseng o ska ba wa mo isetsa morao o mo khothatse o mo eme o nokeng bana beso so ke le leboa ka fela setjhaba haholo sa zone 16 batho ke ba khotsi ba Musa hle batho kaofela ke kopa fela modidi ya tso ha i1 fela le mlo modimo ha kgonne gore a lende ngwanaka a tla ke las bona ke tefa ke batle nix ka ena ke le lebile haholo batswadi a ke ke le lebile haholo le lokolehe ke lapeng ha ke lapeng mona ke kopa le lokolehe le be free ke a lebo
ha re leboe ho motswadi e leng nkgono wa tseba ho monate ka kang ha ho diswa ke nkgono oba nkgono tlo ruta ntho tse ngata tse rona bontate ba ka sheko re sa di etseng re fa bana di phone ba dula ba bapala ka di phone ha ba sa le creative like before. That is why generation ya rona ona tjena e ba mo ilenteng mara nkgono ga o leboa hore ha ne se ka wena Musa nka ba sa bona talent a nang le yona jwale re leboa holo nkgono wa ka ne ke re ke leboe le leadership e teng hape ke acknowledge le the officials tsa Emfuleni tse teng ka go sebaka sena ke acknowledge le di councillors tse teng ka go sebaka sena kaofela nna ke tlile ka ema mona ke sa ipulela re ke mang nna ka lebitso ke kgatle di utlwileng I'm a ward councillor ya ward 32 mara sebakeng se mo ke menteng ke eme on behalf ya ward councillor ya ka mona Elentate Silva Janji bobaneng hayo ka sebakeng sena ne ke re ka ntelo senyana go remise meyara ka lehlaso le matla bana ke bona ntse atla mona na a jumpa hantse re le ntwe se yenzayo ne kopa lo memise ka lehlaso meyara wa rona a tlo fana ka mantswe lena.
All right, now those are live visuals from Sebokeng. That's the home of Sebokeng-born dancer Musa Motha there, who wowed fans at Britain's Got Talent. What a beautiful homecoming for him. Many community members as well as his family are today celebrating him. He may not have won Britain's Got Talent. We do know that the young man who won was a comedian, Vigo Ven, but he most certainly made South Africans proud. And as you would have heard there from one aunt of his saying that it's important to support your children in any talent that they have, and most certainly significant that even if a child then later on in life, as we understand, it was through cancer that he's lost his leg, that you continue to support your child even though they live with a disability, because Musa has gone on to do great things on very big stages for himself, his community, as well as South Africans at large. All right, let's take you to this story now. The Ekurhuleni Community Services, MMC, says they'll be engaging with embassies to assist in the repatriation of the deceased who lost their lives during the gas leak in Boksburg on Wednesday night to their respective countries. 17 people died from a leak in a gas cylinder used in an illegal mining business at the Angelo Informal Settlement.
Still reeling from shock after the fatal gas leak incident, the mood here is very somber. Bereaved families are getting counseling, but their problems are much bigger. They're trying to figure out how to move forward with burial plans.
They don't know what to do because, it's a huge number. One has lost six family members and the other one it's 4. So they're making arrangements in terms of them taking them to their countries of origin, and which is in this case it's Mozambique and Zimbabwe. So we're in the process of just figuring it out and seeing whether we must get the embassies involved in terms of assisting with the burial.
And the makeshift shaft, now waterlogged and deserted. Some residents who responded to the situation are still traumatized.
When we arrived, we found the gates locked. We tried to enter and attempted to turn off the gas, but it was too late because people had already died.
Those who have been affected also received food parcels. Community members say the problems have been brewing for years, but there's no help coming their way. She says Boksburg police are giving them problems because they're always in the area, but they're doing nothing to help them except to collect bribes.
Some Boksburg East police officers are in cahoots with these illegal miners.
Meanwhile, the Human Settlements Department has denied any plans to dismantle shacks in the area, which surfaced following suspicion that certain shacks had gas cylinders. As residents are still trying to come to terms with what happened, for these little ones, it was just another normal day. Mulimone, Motha, SABC News, Boksburg.
And that's where I leave it for today. Have a wonderful day further. We actually leave you with the visuals from Musa Motha's home in Sebokeng. Take a look.
Mamela utwa ayetang ajaifa. Thank you very much. Utwa boy. Yeah. Ke tlo mo kopela fela ka mohauwa. Ko ena fela rabana kaofela. O tla bana le chance ya o shootela ptimo se. La bona ga promote talent. E qala e le mo. La bona la bontate ba di television le e. Le tlo mona television in le. Yebo yes. Le now. Thank you Langeli. Thank you Batwadi. Nerito amohela Musa ho tswa kwana lefatsheng la Engilane re mo amohela lefatsheng la mo a tswalwang teng e leng South Africa. Mpa ka hara South Africa hona le province e bitswang Gauteng. Ka hara Gauteng hona le masepala o bitswang Sedibeng. Ka hara Sedibeng hona le masepala o bitswang Emfuleni. Ka hara Emfuleni hona le zone e bitswang zone 16.